Hey, this is Chris, Paint Life TV. So I'm here at Sashco, and I'm in probably the best room in the entire building, the chemist room. So this is where I love to talk, about products and stuff, and learn about products, what makes them so successful, and what makes them unique and stuff, and why buy expensive versus cheap. And so I got Jim Barnes with me today, and Jim, you are the senior chemist here.
Yep.
And you're the chemist of what? Sashco does they do a lot of things. So
We do. Sashco makes a whole lot of sealants, right? But we also make stains and coatings for log homes. And that's my side of it. I am the stain guy. I make all the stains and coatings for Sashco.
and so I'm really excited about this portion of my tour because I happen to have a log home. And so a true log home, just outside of Tamarack Resort, and it wasn't brand new when I got it. It was weathered really bad, and the logs were almost black on a portion of it. I eventually blasted it, media blasted it down to bare wood again, and then I recoated it, and then I had it chinked, and unfortunately I paid to chink it. I wish I would have did it myself, but I coated it, and it's probably 2 to 3 years ago, and it's already gone peeling and stuff. So I want to hear from Jim, how to take care of my log home, what is available to me, what Sashco has, and some really cool stuff, because you started talking about logs, and logs move more than traditional wood. So
That's right. Yeah.
Let's talk about this
And
stuff. So,
I love talking about logs, and it's kind of funny. We have a funny saying. We say logs ain't wood. Of course, logs really are wood. We're not dumb.
Right.
But what we mean by that is that logs don't behave like traditional wood behaves that we're used to using every day, right? We're used to having siding and trim and stuff like that. That's like these little 1x4 pieces. We're used to building with dimensional lumber, 2x4s that have been cut out of trees, right? But this isn't a log.
right.
There's a lot missing that we've cut away
Right.
for this to be a log. If we look back at a log, this is a log, right?
Right.
And what's interesting is, like cut down trees, right? You peel them, whatever else, and you make log homes out of them. And over time, what happens is they develop a big check, sometimes multiple checks all over it. That's relieving the stress that's built up in the wood. What happens is logs, as they dry, they dry circumferentially. I'm going to mess that all up.
Yeah.
The outside of the logs is going to shrink a lot faster than the inside of the logs. And so what we have is we have all this stress built up, and as it builds up, eventually it just snaps it and cracks it. And you've split wood before.
Yeah,
right?
I've split wood.
That's- takes a lot of work to
It does,
power through some
yeah.
wood. You can imagine the amount of stress is involved in
Right.
doing that. Well, that movement doesn't stop just because we have a nice big check here.
Right.
Every single day, when this log heats up in the sunshine, it's going to start expanding and it'll close that gap a little bit. Every night, it's going to cool down and it's going to shrink, and that is going to actually pull it open a little bit. And same thing goes for moisture content and rain and weather and stuff like that. So these logs are continuously moving.
Right.
If that check is facing downward, we don't worry about it
Right.
because water can't get up here and soak into it.
Right.
Right? If it's an upward facing check like this, where water can come down the face of the log and get into the log, that's where we start to worry about it.
Okay.
And that's one of the things, actually, it's a place that is often missed by many people who
Right.
stain log homes, or logs in general, is they miss the inside of the check. And their one opportunity to really protect that from moisture and water is by filling it up with stain. Making sure the entire
Okay.
inside
Right.
is coated with stain so that it can resist moisture.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If that doesn't happen, I've got examples, right? Here's a nice upward facing check. This was on a part of a deck. Water could run right down it, right? And you can see it goes right down into the center of the wood and starts to rot it out.
Oh,
The outside of the log may look perfectly fine,
right.
right? And in fact, many times it does. And so the customer doesn't even know that there is rot happening.
Right.
Worst is to have a solid color paint or stain on top of the surface because you can't see the water damage that's happening and you don't know when it's time to really go back in and reseal it with more stain.
So you touched on a really good point now here, because you said solid color stains. Now I've been using solid color stains in mountain environments, on log homes, on just homes in general, and I think the practice in general is painters, homeowners, do-it-yourselfers, they're going away from traditional like semi-transparent stains because there's so much maintenance, and they're going to solid colors because they're less maintenance. But apparently using what you just said, using solid color stains is not good practice.
It isn't, and it's not because the color on the surface doesn't last. It does. It actually lasts longer if it's a solid color. But the homeowner doesn't have the vision of what's happening underneath that wood, because invariably, as that wood expands and contracts with the moisture and with the temperatures, it's going to crack the stain on the surface. And that's going to allow moisture in and begin the decay process inside the wood. And what we'd rather have is have a semi-transparent stain on the surface where you can actually see that there's water damage starting to happen. And you go, I don't want that. It's time to put another maintenance coat of stain on there, which will allow you to fill in all the little cracks and things like that might start allowing water into the wood.
Sashco, they are full service. You guys provide stains, you provide caulking, chinking. I think chinking is a big part of your business. I mean, you would chink in between the logs. Would you caulk or chink that crack?
That's a great question. And as long as it's upward facing, we would like to do something to seal it. Right? Ideally, you're going to fill it with stain first. You always stain before you chink. Because it's just much, much easier. And you get the benefit that the stain becomes kind of like a primer underneath the chinking, so it sticks even better. But if the crack is a 1/4 inch or larger, that's when it becomes the size where you can squish the backer rod back there and seal it up with a soft, elastic chinking material or something like Conceal, even Log Builder. They all kind of work that way. This is another piece from a deck. Looks good on the outside, right? You'd say that looks like a great piece of wood.
It does.
Here's the interesting part. Notice the check was never sealed, and yet on the inside it started to rot.
That is really bad. That's rotted really bad.
That's rotted bad. Yeah. Look at that.
You're like really scaring me with my log home.
That's not my intention.
I gotta go home and check my log home.
My intention is to educate, right?
Yes.
But that's the name of the game. We all get better as we learn, and that's
I would have never ever thought. That's absolutely incredible.
We see this every day here. We hear from contractors, we hear from homeowners, and they're experiencing these kinds of things all the time.
So this, if this is the way this sits, in order to have stopped the rot back there, this probably really should be sealed.
Should have been sealed.
I don't think it's wide enough for backer rod, but you would run some sealant, like chinking or something.
You wouldn't actually put it on the inside. Squish it inside. Everybody wants to do that. We all have tended to do that when we started out, right? But what happens is that log continues to move, right? And as it does it winds up squishing up this tongue of sealant. That sticks out. You've seen it on homes, right? Where it sticks out, and you're like, that's not a good look either.
It looks really ugly.
Right? Really small cracks are difficult to seal with a sealant. That's why we focus on the stain instead. And if this had been saturated where you filled up that crack with stain when you were staining it, this would have been filled up with stain. It would have been resistant to water to begin with as a small crack. And then if as time goes on, eventually that crack got to be a little bit wider, now it would be time to throw in some backer rod and actually seal it up properly with some sealant.
So really you're going to have to come up with some method of if you're spraying and back brushing, taking your tip and spraying a ton of stain down in there. I mean, is that what you're talking, or is it you're
That
dumping?
is literally what we're talking
Spray,
about.
okay.
When we talk about the ideal way to spray a stain onto a log home, and we don't care whose stain it is. It could be
Right.
doesn't have to be Sashko's. It could be any stain that you're
Right.
putting on there. We recommend using a sprayer with just the biggest tip you got.
Okay.
It could be an old blown out
Right.
tip from painting
Right.
that you've used enough times,
Yeah.
and you're like, this is a throwaway now. Actually, no, now it's a good stain.
Right.
Pump.
Absolutely.
And it's not there to spray the stain
Yeah.
onto the log. It's there just to pump it onto the wall quickly,
So
you can work with it.
back brush it.
and you let it literally run down the wall,
Right.
run down into these checks and cracks, and start to fill them until it starts leaking out.
Okay.
You know, where that stain is going to naturally run to, that's also where water's going to go.
Right.
So by doing it from the top down, just letting it come down like that, you're really
Yeah.
protecting the wood from wherever water would go into it.
That totally makes sense.
Then we come back and we back brush. This,
Oh, there we go.
all right, this is a man-sized back brush.
There you go. It looks like it's been used too.
It has. This is what we call a block brush. And this
yeah.
one is on a pole. That's really useful, especially in a log home. I would actually challenge you and say it's useful on painted homes too. I
Right.
use these on my own home,
Yeah.
painted, right? Not a log home.
Right.
We can't all afford it. But anyways, as a block brush though, this is a nice one. It doesn't fling back and forth much, right?
Right.
It's thick,
Stiffer.
it's short. The cool thing about these is that I can reach far out
Right.
and far this direction from a ladder
Yeah.
or from scaffolding. I can work a large area pretty quickly,
Right.
so it's efficient work. And I can also muscle the stain into the wood.
Yeah, because it's stiff enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The more you push the stain into the wood, the better it's going to
Better.
stick.
Yeah.
In my first 15 years as just a paint chemist, I'd look at back brushing and I would think about this,
Right.
and I'd think, oh, I need to catch the drips.
Yeah.
Okay, well, catching the drips is one thing. It's sort of spreading out the stain so it's even, or the paint so it's even.
Right.
That's one thing. But that's not pushing the stain into the wood.
Right.
With this one, we can actually push the stain into the wood.
I think we call force penetration.
Yes.
You know, yeah.
And there's a reason why we do that. You want to hold that one?
Yeah.
We actually want to push the stain into the wood because of the actual structure of the wood. Within wood, there are, of course, wood cells, right? You can think of them as a bundle of straws going up the tree, right?
Right.
As this bundle of straws goes up the tree, right, of course, water has to go from one wood cell into the next wood cell, right?
Right.
How does it do that? There's little structures called bordered pit pairs. And inside one cell wall, there's an opening, and it goes to a little cavity. And then the next wood cell forms the other half of that clamshell, right? So it has its opening, right?
Uh-huh.
And a little opening behind it. So in between is this little space. And there's an interesting structure called a margo and a torus in there,
Oh my
which
gosh.
forms like a flapper valve.
Uh-huh.
Now that's total word nerd, right?
Right.
We're nerding out on you. But if a wood cell gets injured by maybe a woodpecker or an insect or whatever else, and the sap starts leaking out,
Right.
right? It's like a straw that's broken, it's cracked, right?
Right.
You can't suck through it anymore. It loses its prime.
Right.
What happens is the water in the wood cell flows out and it pushes on that flapper valve and it seals it. That's why the flapper valves are in there.
Huh.
So that the rest of the tree can keep its prime and it doesn't die.
Right.
Self-correcting. Really cool.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, these bordered pit pairs are sitting in our wood. So at the surface of the wood, in every one of these wood cells, there's just millions of these little bordered pit pairs in there. Right?
Uh-huh.
As we come along and we use a good block brush, right? And we lay down our stain or our paint, if you don't touch it or you touch it very lightly, what happens is it just lays down on top like that, and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't get into that bordered pit pair at all,
Right.
right? Well, if you come along and you brush it, and you brush it hard with some force behind it, you actually push it in, and you squish stain into that bordered pit
Huh.
pair. and it forms a solid little plug in there. When it's dry,
Right.
it's like Velcro.
Right.
It sticks in there really well and holds on to the wood mechanically.
That totally makes
Isn't that
sense.
interesting?
That is very interesting.
Way more wood nerdery than
Yeah.
you would ever want to get into, but it explains.
So it's
why you
interesting
want an
because
extra back
there's a natural profile there
Yeah.
waiting to be created by you backbrushing it. So
That's
by
right.
creating a profile by sanding a surface,
Mhm.
opening it up, this is there opened up, but it'll only be opened if you backbrush
That's
it
right.
and force it down into that. That is really, I mean, that totally makes sense.
That's totally cool.
Why to backbrush something.
Yeah.
And
So it'll
that's pretty
it'll
cool.
work okay,
Right.
but it'll work better
Right.
if you backbrush it.
Yeah.
The only chance you have to backbrush though is on bare wood.
Okay.
Right?
So once
If I'm
it's-
doing recoat on top of some old stain,
right.
these are already blocked. I'm only covering up other stains.
So backbrushing makes no difference once it's already been
That's
coated.
Second coat doesn't
Right.
matter so much. Then second coat, we can go back to the normal backbrushing like I did as a paint chemist.
Right.
I'm catching drips, I'm evening out the color,
Yeah.
whatever else, that's fine.
So if
But
you,
the first coat,
yeah.
I want to power it into the
So,
wood.
so the first coat is really the most important coat. So
Yep.
if you like my log home, if you really want to get back, you know, and start over and do it properly, you're going to blast it down to bare wood. However you're going to do
Yep.
that, I got a wet media blaster, dry blaster. Blast it down to bare wood. First coat, backbrush the heck out of that thing, and then after that, you can add top coats over that, and not have to backbrush it with force, but just backbrush to get rid of runs.
That's right.
So cool.
Yep.
That totally
Just
makes
that,
sense.
just that first coat. You know,
First
you want to power it into the wood if you can.
Cool. That's some
So-
good information.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. So cool. Good to know.